Hey, I'm Stephanie Todd, the host of ERCx Chats. Excited about the session we're about to have today. Here with Matt Watkinson, best-selling author of The 10 Principles Behind Great Customer Experiences, now The Grid.
The great thing is you don't need to predict the future if you're the one who's actually making it.
I think originally when companies are created, they create a product or service, and then all of a sudden people have to call them with problems, right? Because most of the time people aren't calling to say, I love this, I'm surprised and delighted that the door's open and I got to put the music in. And it was very welcoming and it had the undertone of, we're really excited to hear the music you're about to play, right? And now instead there's so much brokenness in customer experience of like, how do you create those principles to then fix it? Where sometimes I wonder, do companies actually want to fix it, or is it they know they exist, the problem, the problems are out there and they know that they're problems, or is it just that they've gotten so big that the problems are here and they don't really know how to address them?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that observation. Yeah, I think so. It's a combination of things that causes people to invest in their customer experience, or to keep on top of it, or to let it slip. I mean, it's always kind of been the way, just kind of human nature, that success breeds laxity and complacency. So when you get really big, when you get really successful, you kind of can end up succeeding your way into failure. There's a great book written on this by a guy called Danny Miller called The Icarus Paradox, where he talks about exactly that. Like, most companies succeed their way into failure for these kinds of reasons. I think some of it is that there's a kind of inherent short-termism in a lot of large companies' planning around quarter to quarter, and a kind of continuum of short-term decisions isn't the same as a long-term decision, right? It's not the same thing. So, if, for example, your customer experience, as almost every company's is heavily reliant on technology, and you're not investing in improving that technology, or you can accrue so much technical debt that it effectively becomes impossible to improve those kinds of things. Big companies are complicated social structures as well as operational structures, and you get a lot of politics and you get a lot of that stuff. And of course, customers don't care about that, do they? They don't want to see your org chart in their experience, do they? They want to see. I had that recently, actually. I think we had a hire car not long ago, like a Mercedes, I think a C-Class or something, and you could literally see the org chart of the company in the experience of just being in the car. Like, oh, they've clearly got one department that does screens, another department that does controls, and another department that does styling, and another department that does the kind of exterior look of the thing, because none of this stuff actually hangs together or works or feels like it's being designed around the driver, to the point where you're like, how do I even turn on the aircon or adjust my chair, or how fast am I going? Like, just total kind of disintegration. So, and that's a really common challenge as well, as as I'm sure you're aware. You have big companies who've got a big divisional structure, but you're trying to create this one kind of seamless continuum of interactions, and if people aren't going to cooperate, or you can't organize the resources around that, then that becomes very difficult as well. Another big challenge, I think, it's just a really simple thing, is just that I've always felt that great customer experiences ultimately come down to psychological proximity. How well do I actually understand or have an inherent or instinctive feel for what my customers want? And that's not the same as having a lot of data, because I think numerical data in particular, it doesn't get you into the mindset or the situation of the people that you're serving. But I think actually spending time with people and getting to know them, getting to understand them, and building a kind of innate feel for what they want is absolutely crucial if you want to create great experiences. And there's all sorts of stories of this, like from all sorts of disciplines. Some companies, the senior management have to work as cabin crew if they're an airline, or they have to spend time on the customer support desk, or there are some stories of engineers like at Toyota, for example. They want to improve this people carrier or minivan. I can't remember what they call them in America. Minivan. They want to improve the minivan. He got in one and he drove it 50,000 miles across America. And noticed all these things, were like, oh, that doesn't work too well, or that could be easier, or even just watching other people using the product, right? So I think we're perhaps a little over-indexed on quant and under-indexed on qual in general. And this is why you see that, small businesses, where these people have no formal training whatsoever in customer care or customer service, often create a great experience because they're psychologically proximate to the people that they're serving, because they see them every day. You see it with Airbnb, for example. You can have a great experience with a host who's just treating you as if they were hosting you at their home, which is exactly what they're doing, obviously. But they're they don't have any formal training, or they don't have a CX strategy. They're just doing what kind of feels right, knowing their kind of customer intuitively. So yeah, I think you can kind of cut out a lot of the crap if you just get people closer to the customer as well.
We had a person on before too who talked about the art and design being something that should be put together, kind of similar to what you're saying, to be able to then influence the experience. And I think a lot of that is thought of in the design of products or services, but then is forgotten in terms of the full journey of how you experience that product. And so you have, or even just thinking, kind of flipping gears and thinking like your dad or Hemingway, whoever was writing on the typewriter, their experience writing versus yours now is probably vastly different in the feel of it, and like how you're thinking the rhythm of what you're writing versus when you're clicking or when you're doing, writing with the pen. I'm sure it all feels a little bit different in terms of how you have the overall experience of something that you're creating.
Yeah, so the way that the way that I like to frame customer experience as a discipline, I guess, and talking about the distinction between product and the broader experience. When we work with our clients, the way that we try and get them to understand where they should be investing their resources or their energy is to say, well, what we're trying to do is we're in the value creation business, right? We're trying to create as much value as we can for our customer. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Where does value come from? Well, value comes from four things. You've got the product or service itself, what it costs and what it does. That's the main thing. That's the main show that people are coming for. Yeah. You've got your particular brand, your associations, expectations, your reputation, the kind of appeal of your brand. Are you a Nike or are you ERCx or somebody? Very different level of appeal in those two brands, for example. Then you've got awareness. People can't value something if they don't know it exists, and our communication should aim to influence the people's perception of value in a positive way. That's why we spend so much money on advertising and writing great copy and that kind of thing. And then the fourth kind of leg of the table is this customer experience piece, this continuum of interactions that people have from the moment that they first become aware of our brand, product or service, all the way through purchasing, first-time usage, repetitive usage, all of that kind of stuff, right? So the way that we think about customer experience in terms of these four things is, well, first of all, there's a lot of competition for most things. So we don't want to leave any of these sources of value on the table. If we've got a great product already, we've got a great brand, got great awareness, maybe we can get more value by focusing on the customer experience. Sometimes we actually end up saying to our clients, forget about it. The problem is that people don't know you exist. That's why you're not selling more, or why you're not growing. So it gives you a kind of framework for identifying that as well. But the other thing, which is, to your point really, is that these things need to work together and be integrated across all four of them, right? So you want your products or services to be seamlessly integrated into everything else. You want to make sure that what you promise in your communication you actually do, which is easier said than done. And the other thing is that you want to make sure that your customer experience is reinforcing your brand by being distinctive and immediately recognizable. So customer experience is working to either amplify the value of all of these other initiatives that you're doing, or it's diminishing them, right? But what we find quite interesting about that is that if you ask most brands, what do you want to be known for when it comes to your customer experience? What makes it distinctive? How is it branded in some way? Or the term that we use is experiential signature. Like, what is it that makes your experience distinctive from your competitors? They can't answer that. They end up being like, oh, well, we'll take a little bit of friction out here and we'll do a little bit of staff training here, or we'll, maybe we'll add a cafe in our shop here, kind of thing. But none of that is laddering up to building any particularly distinctive positioning in the customer's mind. If you look at the greats, if you look at like really successful businesses, they're focused on just doing one thing well. Amazon's a great example of this. Just effort reduction, and kind of stress reduction. It's easy and it's reliable. You don't have like a social relationship with them. There's no emotional connection to Amazon. They don't do anything around, particularly like trying to put you in control or allow you to customize your experience or anything like that. They're like laser focused on how can it be easier and how can it be more reliable. And so when you think, I need to buy something and I want it to be easy and reliable, you kind of think of Amazon. When you think about all these other brands like Disney with their kind of idea of creating kind of magic, or even Apple, possibly more in the, not so much recently perhaps as in the past, but everything was like an aesthetic event. It was a sensory, beautiful, tactile experience with this kind of delightful attention to detail and ease as well, of course. But then you look at these other brands who are investing millions or sometimes tens, hundreds of millions in improving their customer experience, but their efforts are so diffuse, and then there's been no attempt to really brand them. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of these programs are having a poor kind of payoff, because they're not actually influencing the customer's perception of value, and it's because they're not focused enough. So that's something we're really big on when we're working with people.
So it's the distinction that's really tied to the value or like the vision of the company that then you bleed through to the actual experience that makes you different.
Yeah, we want it to be tied to a sense of brand in a very deliberate way. Like most of the companies that create great experiences, they're focused on doing it in a particular way. And this, I think, has been a little bit of my frustration just with the discipline in general, is that I've come to see customer experiences falling under the umbrella of marketing, because I think of marketing as being about value creation. But there are a lot of people in the industry who kind of don't like that idea. They're like, no, we're an alternative to marketing. We are the new marketing. Or like they kind of talk down about these other things like brand building or advertising. Some people say, oh, well, advertising is just a tax you pay for having a bad customer experience. And you're like, well, how are they ever going to have an experience with you if they don't know that you exist? And like it's very easy to forget most brands, even if you have a great customer experience. So you need to be reminding them of your existence. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the discipline in general to just take a more integrated approach and embrace marketing as a discipline much more, and say, how can we make sure that what we're doing ties in with what you're doing? How can we make sure that we set you up to succeed? How can we work together in a more integrated way? And I just generally don't see a lot of that. And that's kind of self-defeating.
Yeah, I think in traditional business silos, you had marketing in one group, and it was a cost center to be a contact center. If people are calling us, it costs us money versus thinking about it differently. Yeah. And then especially when marketing used to run all the websites, and now the contact centers, how you engage with brands is on your websites. It's in digital channels, where it used to be primarily you're calling a phone number.
Yeah.
Now it has to blend together to be successful, but you still see some of the rub and tension between the two groups to say, oh no, like, you stay out of it, you guys just answer calls or you manage the contact center versus tying the two together to really drive the value.
Yeah, and we saw that, I mean, even going back in the time tunnel to when I was designing websites, like when we were in UX, UI, we were like, no, we're like, you guys are just coloring in and doing fluffy stuff in marketing, and you're making our stuff harder to use by like saying, oh, no, that's got to be this hex color or that Pantone reference, or this has to be bigger or that has to be smaller. And we're like, no, you're like messing up our user-tested, beautiful design. And so there was a kind of tension, combative thing going on back then between design and brand. But I think, as I've kind of had more experience, continued to learn and develop and expand my own kind of professional practice or understanding of what it takes to succeed in business, I think that, we need to play nice together, and we need to integrate more. And I think that the key to that is just learning more about these adjacent disciplines and not just getting deeper and deeper into our specialism, but learning to see all the moving parts together. And that was the impetus behind writing the second book, which was trying to give people more of a broader overview of how a business actually works as an interconnected whole and what all the parts are, and hopefully give people a little bit of a primer about each of these different moving parts and more of an understanding of how they fit it together.